Samar, you need to accept the invite. Okay, let me send you an invitation again.
Oh, okay.
Okay, you've joined us, right?
Yes.
Okay. This has never happened before. This is like, okay, so I've sent her invite again.
If this doesn't work, we'll start.
We'll do the Zoom, yes.
Yeah, and then record it and post it.
And then we can upload it, yes. Let's see, I've invited her again. So Mariam, we will be spending like maybe 1 hour. She declined. No, we're not doing Zoom. Samar, try to join us here right now, okay? Please.
Oh.
I think, oh, she's here.
Okay.
Thank God.
But I'm joining from my phone. I'm joining from my phone, so
she can't.
I'll have to put my phone down.
That's fine.
Because then, otherwise I'll be holding it in my hand.
So you see, Mariam, what happened? She was trying to join from her laptop, and so it doesn't work like that.
You have to
on the phone. Let me just do that.
Okay, that's fine.
Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. And I'm so sorry, everyone, for the technical issue. I'm not sure what happened, but really, really happy to be here. Okay.
Okay, hi everyone. We really, really, really apologize for all the delays and, with what has happened. These were the circumstances which were not in our control. So once again, please accept our apologies. So today, we will make it very, very quick. So it's not going to be about me, the session, because you all know the work I do. So we are joined by Long Beach Initiative, which is run by Mariam, and we are joined by Samar, who's a PhD student from Canada. She's British, but she's studying in Canada. So we'll start off with Mariam, and then we will move on to Samar. So Mariam, please introduce yourself and tell us about your work, please. Thank you.
So my name is Mariam, and I'm the director of the Lone Initiative, which is a U.S. on eating disorders, disordered eating, and body image in Muslims. And it's the only one right now, the only 501c in America focuses on this issue. And it's a very important issue. Our work is very kind of domestic, but also global in that in the domestic aspect, we are trying to kind of put together trainings and resources for providers in disorder providers in America that are non-Muslim, that have Muslim clients, to allow them to provide a more informed approach to care. And then we also try to educate, Muslim youth and Muslim student organizations about eating disorders. And then on the global scale, we are trying to help make eating disorders more accessible in Muslim countries where, there are people that struggle with financial issues when it comes to getting. So, yeah.
So, Mariam, what made you start the organization? If you could please tell us.
So initially, I started it as just a general kind of organization for anyone with disorders, just because I myself in the U.S. face barriers to access treatment because of insurance not like accepting coverage and treatment being very, very expensive. And that's when I realized that a lot of insurance companies don't cover eating disorder treatment, and they also that there's also this very, very highly expensive rate for treatment that many people afford. So initially started as kind of an initiative for anyone that had struggles with affording treatment. But I kind of looked at and wanted something that could be more identity focused, more faith focused, because I noticed there aren't any based organizations. So slowly developed into a more Islam and Muslim based initiative. So yeah, that's kind of where it came from and how it got to where it is now.
Yes. Yes, thank you. So, Mariam, I mean, in America, I mean, there are barriers to treatment. Everything is very, very, very expensive. So, could you just give us one example of, if somebody comes to you for the help, I mean, how can they do it?
So, when it comes to coming for help, there's multiple. Well, first, like when it comes to getting help in the beginning, our website has many avenues for contact, forms you can fill out, or you can just send an email, that kind of stuff. But when it comes to how we can help, it depends on what the barrier is, right? If it's a financial barrier, we have treatment grants for treatment, and if it's more barrier in that you're unable to get a diagnosis or maybe you don't fit what people perceive the image of disorders to be, you're not, especially in the US, they kind of, a lot of the Western world, the image of who gets an eating disorder is like very, very thin, white women. If you're male, if you're not white, or if you're in, not a very, very race, very, very unlikely that you get a diagnosis. So kind of our work is not only informing practitioners and providers, but also providing financial aid. So, and of course, there's so many other barriers. So depending on what the barrier is, we're here to help. And again, like our work is targeted towards populations, but anyone can reach out, and we always, direct you to the place where you can get additional help.
So, Mariam, tell us about, you're a Muslim and you're in America. So do you think there are more Muslims who are coming forward and speaking about, the eating disorder? What about the therapists and other professionals? Are there more Muslims in this field who can come forward and help?
Unfortunately, I've noticed that there are not a lot of, Muslim eating disorder therapists and dietitians. There are quite a few that I know that are amazing and do a lot of work. Of course, the sheer amount of people that struggle with eating disorders that are Muslim, there's no way that they can see everyone. And a lot of the time people will go to dietitians that are not Muslim, which is okay because of course they know they have the same knowledge as someone who is Muslim, but the issue arises kind of in understanding someone's mentality and their faith, because a lot of your psychological well-being is kind of rooted in what your beliefs are. So sometimes it's really beneficial to have a therapist or a dietitian that kind of knows and aligns with the way that you're thinking. But because there isn't many in the United States in general, just because eating disorders itself is a very niche topic, and also it's not something that a lot of ethnicities that are mainly Muslim decide to go into, unfortunately. So that's why it's very important to try to spread awareness to other practitioners that are non-Muslim on how they can talk to Muslim clients. And I think that this knowledge is more widespread as there are more people advocating for it, more very mainstream American organizations advocating for it. A while back we did a collaboration with which is like pretty much the largest eating disorder nonprofit in the US, and to be able to get information about Muslims with disorders out to with a large nonprofit was really beneficial, because they have a lot of practitioners that are also following them. So that kind of stuff is very
Yes, thank you. That's really good. You're sharing all this. I also wanted to ask you. I mean, because you yourself has gone through the whole process. You know the system, and that's why you started your organization. I mean, tell me, one of the the challenges you felt you faced, and in your organizations. I mean, how can you make sure that the other people, the problems you faced, they will not face when they are receiving the treatment?
Yeah, this is very important. So one of the main challenges, well, there's so many challenges, but something that I really noticed that is very under discussed is kind of the food options available in treatment centers. So when I was in treatment, the treatment center that I was at, they didn't have any halal options. And for my family, we follow a pretty strict kind of when it comes to halal meat and what we're gonna eat. And so when I was there, I had to be vegetarian. And the thing is, it was kind of weird because the people that there were people that were vegetarian as a part of their eating disorder, as a way to restrict their intake. They went vegetarian, and the treatments like make them not be vegetarian because it was a part of their eating disorder. And for me, the opposite, where they were like, "Oh, you have to be vegetarian because we don't have anything for you to eat." And when I came out of treatment, that was a really big challenge for me because I was not used to eating my own cultural foods, the things that I was used to. And, you know, at the treatment center, I worked on this kind of exchange system. Essentially, like, you have a meal plan and you have like 2 exchanges of grains, 2 exchanges of protein, 2 exchanges of fat, like as a way to like avoid counting calories, but also including proper nutrition. But the issue with the exchange system is the kind of the way that food relates to exchanges. The only things that they taught us about were like foods that are very like, I say, like basic American food. You know, we had like peanut butter and jelly sometimes, we had like baked potatoes, those kinds of things that I never ate outside the treatment center. And so the big problem was, when you come out of treatment, being able to adapt to your cultural foods and religious foods and all of that stuff again. And, a lot of times there's not a lot of support, and that leads to relapse for a lot of people. And for me, it was a really big struggle because I couldn't see myself eating something if I didn't know the amount of exchange in it. And of course, there's no way of knowing how much exchange is in like a kardai that my mom makes, something like that, because that was not something that we had at the treatment center. And again, I had to be vegetarian. So, yeah.
Yes, I think I can understand that because here I think NHS. I'm in UK and we have a national health system, and I think they have come quite a long way. But when I was in the treatment, I also had to go for the options, which were vegetarian, and I think I told you, Mariam, that half of the food didn't even make sense to me because it's not something we eat at home. So you're basically in a foreign setting, and you are given the foods which are really foreign. And also, I mean, do you really feel that in America? I mean, I know that because we are speaking about Muslims and the treatment, and I think one of the problems is there is a lack of understanding when it comes to the faith. And so, I mean, how did you worked around the whole issue that you're a Muslim and you're a practicing Muslim as well, mashallah, so I mean, was it like kind of foreign to them because it's a very liberal kind of I wouldn't call it a secular society, but it's a very different kind of a country.
Right. So the good thing about the environment that I was in, especially living in kind of the treatment center was located in Houston and downtown Houston, where a lot of people are more open-minded and willing to learn. And so when I was there for like pretty much like it was like day and night. So obviously I had to pray. There were things that I had to do. And they were very understanding and very willing to learn about a lot of things. I could explain like, this is what I'm doing. This is how I pray. Yes, I'm washing my feet before I pray. It's not weird. This is what I do. Those kinds of things, people were very willing to learn, and I'm very grateful for that. But I know that there are a lot of places where that's not the case, and where, people, these kinds of things that you don't understand, you become kind of hostile towards it. And that for people in treatment that are in those areas where, they're Muslim and they're in full-time treatment and they have to pray and they want to practice their religion while also, getting treatment, and maybe they're in an environment that's hostile towards them, it makes, treatment so much harder because something you value is your faith, and you can't get that value when you're already in a situation where you're struggling. So, but I definitely know of people that have been in situations where they have had, kind of hostile behavior towards them because of their faith, which, makes treatment 100 times harder. Thankfully for me, that was not the experience. It was really mainly just with food, with halal food options, which kind of made me a little upset. Because being in downtown Houston, there's a lot of halal food options within like a 1 mile radius, like very, very close by. You can find lots of halal food. And they got almost all of their food from outside. So it's kind of upsetting for me that that kind of accommodation was not made. Despite how expensive treatment was, and despite how hard it was for me to eat these foods that I didn't even enjoy, even if it wasn't my eating disorder. I couldn't eat them because of how little I enjoyed them, but I still had to force myself to. And whenever I brought up that complaint, it was as if, it was kind of like, oh, people kind of treated me as if I was making an excuse, or if that was my eating disorder talking, even though I knew that it's not that I didn't want to eat it because of eating disorder thoughts. It's because I didn't want to eat it because it's something that I just completely foreign to me. And I knew that I liked the taste of. So, it definitely, there's so much complexity to treatment and lots of things that can be harder than it needs to be.
I think, the difference I see is, Mariam, that, in Pakistan, I mean, already, I mean, I can only speak about Pakistan and the treatment there because, I went there, but I saw how things work. Because it's a Muslim country, so, everything kind of, falls into the place. But whereas, I see that, when you're not in a Muslim country, you really have to go out of your way to educate someone. I was one of the first Muslims they had to deal with, and they were really, really excellent to me. But food was an option, was one of the big struggles. I mean, I never said a word, but yes, there were few times when I completely broke down because I thought to myself, there is no way I can eat this. And then, and I think, what is really, really helpful, if they have one of the things I really campaigned for was a few years back was speaking to the imams and trying to explain to them, and having the religious figures step in, because I think that support from the community is so vital as well. In Pakistan, that's not an issue because already, I mean, the therapists, they always combine the spirituality within the treatment, because otherwise they don't think so someone can recover fully without the elements of spirituality. But here, everybody was very open-minded. But I really felt, as Mariam, if my local imam was involved, and it could have made so much of a difference in my treatment. I mean, how do you feel that you were isolated? I mean, there was no, involvement, from the community when you were going through the treatment?
There was definitely that feeling. There was actually, there's this one masjid that I went to one day that I didn't go to often, and the imam there was talking about how if you are depressed, then it's because you're not being grateful enough to God. And to me, that was very hurtful because I felt like, well, does this mean that there's something religiously wrong with me along with this eating disorder and something that I'm doing wrong? And for someone who is a practicing Muslim and values their faith very strongly, saying something like that can really hit a chord. But it was and that was where I really felt isolated, because I felt like, oh, not only is there something wrong with me with this like eating disorder, but now there's also like I'm religiously like separate because I'm doing something wrong in this like part as well. And I'm really grateful that I had parents that were like, no, this is not true. Depression is a imbalance. It's you can't start blaming yourself for these kinds of things. And so all of that to say that I think there needs to be a lot more awareness amongst religious figures as well, because I think a lot of the time they will say they will kind of put together being less religious and having mental health problems when those two are not as interrelated as they think they are. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can see from the insurance point of view, many insurances in America, they don't cover the ED side, the eating disorder. So that also shows that, they don't even, I mean, there's a discrimination within the insurance system, how they prioritize, one illness over the other. And then I think the third thing is the biggest challenge is, Mariam, it is very, very expensive. I mean, the people I get from America, I mean, I don't think so. I mean, I only know, I think I can count them on my hand, how many of them were able to go through the system and get the insurance to cover them. Others, I mean, it just didn't work. And so, it really makes you question, why this treatment is so expensive. It's not like, around the clock, they're performing, surgical procedures on you, or, they're doing something, which is really, really big. I mean, it's something, which is, it involves a lot of CBT side, the cognitive behavior therapy side, and I think to charge, I mean, such amount. I mean, you can easily pay $1,500 for a day if you're in a treatment, Mariam. Yeah, and that's like, and yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, and it's really absurd. And you know, with insurance companies, that's where it becomes even more isolating, because there's this phrase that the eating disorder throws around a lot, is like sick enough. Essentially, you know, like insurance companies need you to be so sick that they feel giving you money for your treatment is worth it. And it's absurd, because can you imagine someone has, you know, stage 1 cancer, and your insurance company says, we won't pay for your treatment until it's stage 4, because that's the time when we're going to think it's worth it. They don't do that. But with eating disorders, it's like, oh, you've only lost this much weight, or oh, you've only like ruined your physical health this much. Well, ruin it to the maximum that you can, and then we can give you the payment that you need to cover your treatment. And, you know, for a lot of people, that is what drives them to these, you know, horrible places in their eating disorder. And it also kind of creates this kind of competitive nature amongst eating disorders, where you have to compete with people, like, oh, this person got insurance coverage because they're worth getting coverage for their treatment because they're, quote, sick enough. But I'm not worth it because I'm not sick enough, and my insurance doesn't think I'm worth it. And this kind of like self-worth and how sick you are is like tied together so much. It's very harmful.
Yeah, I think, Mariam, you're doing excellent, you know, work out there, because this is so much needed. And even here in UK, you know, the NHS system, the waiting list is so long. If you even look at the news, I mean, you will see that, you know, people are on the waiting list, and especially, you know, in Scotland and Ireland, I mean, there is nothing really available, because, you know, again, and, you know, here even we are facing the treatment crisis. And that's where, you know, the organizations really need to step in, Mariam, because, you know, you need to, it doesn't matter who comes to you. For example, after my last live session, someone came my way. And I honestly, when I spoke to her, I realized, you know, she was not at that severe stage. But for me, that was still a severity, because, you know, she's suffering, she's struggling. And I know that it will simply go, it will increase, you know, what is in her mind, what she's suffering from. It's not going to diminish with the time. It's simply going to increase, and she needs the support. So, you know, if you catch the ED at the beginning stage, it doesn't matter who comes to you, you offer the help. Mariam, honestly, you won't even have people having to go into the residential. And nowadays, you know, everything is online anyway, so, you know, you can really support and help someone. And I think the financial side is a big struggle, because I honestly, how can you expect someone from country like Tajikistan or Kazakhstan or even Afghanistan, you know, to afford help? Even from the Egypt, you know, I mean, people cannot even afford something as $10 to $12 a day, you know, for the treatment. So I think this is where, just to save the human life, I think the money should never become an obstacle or a barrier to getting the treatment. So I think excellent. I think well done. And I think, you know, I am looking forward to collaborating with you, so, you know, we can really make the difference and help as many people as we can. So, Mariam, we will go to Samar now. Samar, hi, you can hear us?
Oh, yes. Hello, Assalamu alaikum. I'm so happy that finally this is working for me. I was getting quite worried there. So a little bit about me. I'm a PhD candidate in religious studies from the Department of Religious Studies at McMaster University in Canada. I am British Muslim, and I have sort of come back home to research in much more depth the spiritual aspects of and the root causes of eating disorders. There is already extensive information available on like the feminist theories, the addiction models, what's happening in the NHS, cognitive-based therapy, and now we have CBTE. I mean, we'll go into that in a bit. However, there tends to be a lack of research on what are the psychospiritual approaches that are undertaken by Muslim therapists to treat eating disorders amongst Muslim women. But more importantly, what I'm interested in is what are the experiences of these Muslim women who choose to go towards their own faith and engage with Islam to treat their inner selves. So that's really where it's coming from an existential perspective, leaving aside the bio-bio model and the biosocial model and the biosocial cultural model. All of that, we already know that there are cultural issues. There is stigma associated with it. It is very difficult to overcome. So what is going on? And that's really where I sort of come in. I was doing some sort of preliminary research on statistics, especially amongst Muslim women in England suffering from eating disorders of all sorts. And there aren't many. Okay. I mean, what we do have are recent statistics from the NHS. In fact, there was a recent study that was undertaken initially in 2017. And then again, it was followed up in 2020, 2021, and 2022. And they sort of identified that from those people that actually took part, that it was more common amongst young girls, more common amongst white young girls, which of course we know is not the case. The prevalence was also higher in older age groups, sort of varying from like 0.1% between 5 to 10-year-olds compared with 0.6% between 11 and 16-year-olds, and then going up and up to 0.8 between 17 and 19-year-olds, and then up 1.6%, even more than that, between 17 to 19-year-olds again. However, initially from the research that I've been conducting, I've met with Muslim women, over 18, obviously, that is the focus of my research, from all different age ranges. And it is non-discriminatory in terms of your age or your ethnicity, because don't forget that eating disorders, especially the research that's been conducted in England, it's not just about South Asian Muslim women. It can affect the BME community, the Black Muslim women, but we don't tend to have that much information on them. And then my question is, how does one then get through that silence to bring the voices of Muslim women and their experiences to light, and hopefully, finally, to create some diversity in research on eating disorders and how it intersects with religion and spirituality? That's really where I'm coming from. Now, in terms of hospital admissions, that's seen a dramatic rise as well. In 2021 and 2022, there were over 5,500 hospital admissions, and this was actually up by over 2,500 from like the previous years. Okay, and it's rising. And then the rise of eating disorders is further compounded by barriers to treatment that you were just discussing, such as like a backlog in the NHS eating disorder treatment programs, therapies that do not speak to the religious and cultural values of the Muslim individual that's seeking that treatment. And again, further research, it tends to focus on the prevalence and like the causes being associated with culture, right? And that eating disorders are culturally bound. There is also a lack of statistics amongst Muslim women who are suffering and trying to overcome an eating disorder. So the traditional etiology, not to bore you too much, but I think it's important just to give some context. Since the late 19th century, the series of disordered eating, they have varied greatly. And tracing the appearance of symptoms of perversion of the will, okay, that it's some sort of neurosis, developmental disturbances, oppressive patriarchal culture, biochemical imbalances, genetic predispositions, maladaptive cognition and perception, sexual abuse, problems with the mother, problems with the father, problems with weight, size, and many other factors. So then we have then CBT, and now we have CBTE, enhanced CBT. And now these typically last, and if you can get it, great. They tend to be private, you have to pay for them. So what about that Muslim woman who might be on low income housing and cannot afford these privatized treatments? And if they're not available, what happens? They sign up with the NHS, they come across a therapist who doesn't really understand their culture, or worse, they're put on the waiting list. Now, what's happening when they're on the waiting list? So all of these gaps, of course, they need to be addressed, and it's not my job to address them. my job is to really sort of find out what is the experience and what is the nature of eating disorders in the way that women engage with their bodies, engage with their faith, and engage with the material environment, the world that they are around. So how do they associate themselves and disassociate themselves from the material world? And what does that mean in terms of spirituality and treatment? Right? You're with me, okay? Hope I'm not like boring everybody.
No.
Okay. So now therapies, let's go to therapies. So therapies involve identifying, challenging, replacing these thoughts and behaviors. And one medical viewpoint on eating disorders is that there are physical illnesses that can be treated with a combination of medication, nutritional rehabilitation, and psychosocial support. Now, don't get me wrong. All of these are very, very important. And another thing that is important to note as well, it's not a one-size-fits-all model. Some of these therapies might work for one person, for another person they might not work. But something that is shared with all of these individuals is their nafs, it's their soul, right? There's definitely something that is much deeper that needs to be looked at. Now, very interestingly, I attended a fantastic conference on BIPOC communities looking at eating disorders amongst Black and minority ethnic women from all across the world. Most of the speakers were from America. I have to say that there's fantastic work going on in the States and some in Canada. And we need to do some catching up here in England, you know. So more recently, the use of psychotropic drugs, using horse tranquilizers, like different types of addiction, compulsive disorder medication, and all of that. These are also now being looked at. Mushrooms, magic mushrooms, that's like a new thing that people are looking at in terms of, psychotropic drugs to try and change the cognition and the patterns of the brain. Very interesting, okay? And then another medical theory is that disordered eating is genetic and it runs in the family. So what does that mean? You just put your hands up and go, right, that's it, I was born with it, there's nothing I can do about it, you know? Then, of course, we have the addiction theory, that eating disorders are incurable, akin to alcoholism. The theory holds that being in recovery depends on continued abstinence, the development of social environmental support of abstinence, and, of course, spiritual strengthening to prevent relapse. It's something very similar to this continued abstinence, similar to a 12-step AA treatment program being applied to eating disorders. And my question is that how do you abstain from food when you need food to survive? So what happens to the addiction model then, especially within Muslim and Islamic cultures, where food plays a pivotal role in the human being, in the way they celebrate life, and is seen as a barakah from God. So where's the addiction model then? So many of the treatment models that we have available in the West, they tend to follow the medical, behavioral, or addiction models, or childhood development, family dysfunction, trauma and sexual abuse, to help understand the cause of the eating disorder, viewing it as a dysfunction or trauma as critical to the later development of that eating disorder. My question is, what about for those women who have not gone through trauma and for whom trauma might not be a significant factor, or perhaps they have not been sexually abused? So how do you diagnose them and how do you treat them? So they will need to go deeper still to find the roots of the disordered eating. So the psychospiritual approach to understanding eating disorders goes beyond pathological psychodynamics, family dysfunction and trauma. It goes beyond feminist theories concerning body image and patriarchal culture and religion. And the psychospiritual approach delves into the inner conflict that afflicts the person suffering from the eating disorder. Now, how do you do that? So feminist theorists and anthropologists, and I would say that I'm an anthropologist by trade in my sort of academics, they've sought like a whole dynamic ways of thinking about it. And there are many rich findings that focus on, but unfortunately these findings, what are they focusing on? Anorexia anorectic bodies of white women. They do not account for the subjective experiences and the lived realities of Muslim women, and nor do they examine the psychospiritual aspect of eating disorders and how this affects the spiritual well-being of the Muslim woman with an eating disorder. Okay, is my research, obviously I'm doing a doctorate, so it is very, very focused, okay, on specific things. So the nature of eating disorders, it can lead to habituated mind-body practices, which can be developed, you know, over months or even years, which become a deep-seated part of the human psyche and the individual's personality. And often they manifest how? They manifest in ambivalence and resistance from the nafs to any change that disrupts the disordered eating thoughts and patterns that have taken root within the inner core of the individual and overshadow the voice of the soul, and that where the language of the soul is actually sitting and has been silenced, if you can think of it like that, right? The eating disorder can also become a religion in and of itself, leading to rituals around food, food restriction, rejection, fear of food, body dissatisfaction. And then these rituals, they surround the physical and temporal body, and they often become a way for women to cope. They become a habit, okay? So but if you think about it, the struggles with food, they become literal rather than symbolic, and a symbolic language, and hunger as a physical act of self-inflicted starvation rather than spiritual cultivation and purification. Now, Islam is beautiful, that every illness that comes towards us, it is an opportunity for us to connect back to our faith, and then to seek that salvation and to seek that support through Allah. Of course, I'm speaking to believing Muslim women here, and don't forget, my research is very, very niche. It may not speak to everybody, okay? It is only since the past few years that we've seen greater reporting of the rise of eating disorders in the Muslim world. Recent quality studies, actually an excellent one that was done here in England just a couple of years ago, it examined how Ramadan can impact British Muslim women, girls, with respect to their motivations for fasting. And they studied these highlighted that Ramadan can potentially lead to disordered eating behavior, body image issues, and heightened anxiety during iftar. And now you imagine, iftar is like a family event oriented around community. Somebody who's scared of food, doesn't want to eat, is worried about, you know, what they're going to feed like afterwards. What happens then? There are also conflicting reports concerning the hijab and the experience of body dissatisfaction amongst Muslim women. Whereas some studies indicate that the hijab serves as a protective factor from the internalization of body image issues, others highlight that hijab-wearing Muslim women suffer from eating disorders. We know that, right? So there is some real conflict here. Anthropological and ethnographic studies, they are reporting contradictory findings. A unifying theme that cuts across these studies is the non-discriminatory nature of eating disorders. And as I said before, there seems to be a deeper issue at play, that being the inner conflict experienced by that nafs of the person. So we then look at the psychospiritual approach, then regardless of whether you have anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder, disordered eating practices, it engages and each of these, they carry their own uniqueness in the way the individual's mind and body experiences engagement and disengagement from the material world. The psychospiritual perspective creates that potential for disordered eating to be a breakthrough instead of a breakdown. It approaches the crisis as having spiritual significance, as an opportunity for growth. Now, the paths through which the soul's influence flows into life are the five senses of the body, plus emotions, thoughts of that personality. When one becomes over-identified with one's body or the eating disorder, and the emotions and thoughts that are associated with that eating disorder, what happens? The connection with the soul begins to weaken because you're paying less attention to it. Of course, it's going to weaken. The more you focus on something, the better you'll be at it, the more used to you will get at doing it. And the other thing that might be helping you gets left behind because we can only do one thing at a time, right? Now, in terms of Islam, it's an embodied religion. And for Muslims, religious practices are an integral part of how Muslims experience their faith and their connection with God. The physical acts of salah and the cognitive acts of dhikr are intended to provide discipline and enable the individual to connect with their spiritual self within their worldly existence. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, there's
there is background noise, and I'm not sure why. I don't know how to change it either. So this disciplined form of worship, which helps ground the individual both physically and mentally, it's more than that. It repositions one's cognition towards goodness, positivity, and eventually it affects the qalb and the inner state of the individual beyond their thoughts and their bodies. It includes Sufism, tasawwuf, helping you cultivate that inner self, that nafs, dhikr, addressing the qalb. All of these are basically how one approaches the psychospiritual aspect of eating disorders. And what I'm most interested in is two things. One, how Islamic spiritual therapy, specifically for eating disorders, is delivered in England by psychotherapists that are practicing in this area. And I would love them to reach out and speak with me if they will. And the second one is for Muslim women to come forward and talk about their experiences with different kinds of treatments, and how do they manage and cope with inner urges of relapse. You know, you can be a practicing Muslim and you can relapse. You can go straight back into your eating disorder. How do you cope with that? I would love to know that. What is that feeling? What is that state of being in the world that these women are experiencing? And for me, there is no right or wrong answer. It's all about human experience and subjective human experience, but then underpinning that is that role of spirituality to help you through that eating disorder. So working through dua. Now, another important thing, there's of course the danger that you can, the dua, salah, dhikr, all of them can be used as a form of escapism. Okay, you can escape it, you're avoiding eating disorder. What you need to, of course, the treatment is extremely important, but it also needs to be, you have to do work on yourself. You can't just do dhikr and then do salah and then magically the eating disorder will go away. It involves taking stock. It's hard work, you know. Anything you want to achieve is going to require hard work, you know. And it's not easy. It's very, very difficult. So this work, what does this work involve? This work involves addressing the emotions that underpin the eating disorder, be this anger, sense of loneliness, fear of being alone, fear of not belonging, fear of how much you're going to weigh, fear of clothes not fitting in, and all of this, and then anger. Maybe something happened to you in life, you know? Or maybe it's the way that you express yourself. This is my identity. This is my eating disorder. This is how I identify myself. And this is how I'm going to engage with the world. Now you take that eating disorder away. Where is my identity? Where do you find that identity? And that's what I'm interested in learning about in terms of Islam and Islamic spirituality, in giving you that foundation where those roots of that eating disorder are grounded into, strengthening that foundation. And of course, the roots will become strong as well. It's not easy, but it can be done. So we have repentance, tawbah, prayer, salat, zikr, recitation of the Quran. All of these things are important, and I'm looking at all of these different things. Doing tahajjud prayers. You know, there was a very, I don't know if I'm picking up too much of your time, and you can cut me off anytime, because obviously this is my research, and I will just go on and on and on and on. You've got to stop me, okay? Otherwise I probably will not stop. but they did a very interesting study on substance abuse. This was actually done in India, and they applied Islamic psychotherapy for these patients who had addiction problems with substance abuse, cannabis, heroin, things like that. Okay, of course there was like, they had like proper treatment, but the Islamic spiritual thing that they did included a very interesting things: 2 to 12 rakat of tahajjud prayer at 3:30 in the morning, being awoken at 1 to 2 hours pre-dawn or fajr prayer during the first night of therapy, and then this remains steady up to the 40th day of the therapy in quest of forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then all of these devoted practices of du'as. Then there was auto-suggestion. I mean, I'm not going to go into it, zikr of like reciting so many names and then recite the Quran. So there needs to be like an education as well, I would say, in treatment programs that work with Muslim women. Okay, of course there needs to be, I hope that the NHS will explore more greatly the spiritual aspects and how that can be brought into treatment, especially for like minority faith communities. And then of course how the religion of Islam is, used by the practicing Muslims to help them come out of this. So I'm presently recruiting Muslim women and Muslim psychotherapists that specialize in eating disorder treatment, Islamic spiritual therapy and Islamic psychospiritual therapy, and then Muslim women who've been in treatment, who are currently in treatment and outside of treatment. Now, if you have not been part of Islamic spiritual therapy, it does not matter. I still want to speak to them to understand their experience from a Muslim woman's point of view. That's really where I'm coming from, and now I'll stop.
Thank you, Samar. That was really, really, really fantastic. So, Maryam, I mean, any thoughts? I mean, was spirituality part of your treatment program or no?
It wasn't part of my treatment. It was a very program, but what was really in outpatient, she was very, and she is a Christian. When we would try to see, goal in both of our lives and how to help in recovery, especially because she tried to understand my faith, kind of questions when it came to therapy. That was very meaningful. This research, especially when it comes to talk to non-politicians. U.S. there aren't that that their leaders, and come to talk about that and practice with their Muslim patients and give them that able to help them as well. And so I really think it's meaningful when it comes to that. In so many ways as well, this is that can inform on what to do with that they are not don't identify with themselves.
Yeah. Samar, the voice is breaking up, Maryam. I don't know what the reason is, but we couldn't hear most of what you were saying.
Most of what I was saying?
Yes.
Oh,
your voice was really breaking up. Yes, so I don't understand why it happened.
Oh, is it better? Is it okay now?
It's better now.
I think it's like microphone.
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you. I have no problem hearing anyone. But your voice was breaking up when you were talking.
Oh, yeah, I was that. Is it better now? Or is it still breaking?
Little bit breaking.
Are you using those hands free or no?
No.
You're on speakerphone.
Yeah, I think maybe it was placed on something that why like the bottom of the thing is on something that might.
Yeah. I think maybe when we play the recording, maybe it will be better sometimes. And I think also with the Insta live Samar, honestly, it's not just Maryam. Every time I'm speaking to people, we get after 1 hour, it does, the voice does start breaking up. So, Mariam, what you shared was, I mean, I think it was very, very significant. And Samar, your research, I mean, what you mentioned about this being a niche research. We need so much research in this field, especially, from the Muslims side. Mariam
Yes.
also acknowledges. And the problem is, I mean, there is no limit to how much research we can do because everyone has a unique mind. They have a unique perspective into this illness. And, there is, I mean, even to this day, Mariam, we all know, you can go from organization to organization. You can go from a treatment center to the treatment center. Everybody's different, and why? Because there is no set treatment for this illness, so everyone is trying what they feel may help someone. So Samar, I think your research in spirituality is a really, really, really going to make difference because this illness is still a new concept. People still don't know about this, but addiction is more well known. I mean, especially the abuse of narcotics. It's very well known thing in the Muslim world. There is a treatment, and the religious side. What you shared about India was very, very good, Samara. I think that's something I would like to look into. And I think I would also like to share that, we don't know what can work with anyone, so it should be an open platform and individuals should be allowed to make the choice, I mean, if somebody wants to go down the healing spirituality path, then that's their right. If somebody wants to use the CBT and, the other psycho therapies, then that's their right as well. So we don't know, what would work for someone. Samar. So it is a very, very important research because I know in Pakistan, the religious healing, the spiritual healing is like it's very famous, and it really has helped lots of people. I mean, I myself visited a center and I saw how they were using the Quranic meditation to heal people. Yes, and you've heard of that as well, Samar. I think the Surah Rahman is used.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And so, Mariam, I am interested, Samar mentioned something about when somebody gets an urge, eating disorder, thought in their mind, and, they get these feelings and urges that they want to, relapse. It doesn't matter how, again, I mean, we have to, let's make one thing clear. It doesn't, every single person will get not right thoughts in their mind, because we all are human beings. But then it's up to us, how we fight them. I mean, when you get really angry, now the decision is yours whether you want to throw something at someone or no, but you will get this in your mind. So it's up to you. So, Mariam, I'm interested when you were in the center and, of course, they know that you will get these urges. You were paying them such a high astronomical amount of money. So what did they come up with? I mean, how did they prepare you to battle those urges and those thoughts and everything? Keeping in mind you were paying them really high money.
The biggest thing was we talked. There was a lot of like group therapy, kind of every thought palette. That was the biggest thing that they talked about was like, oh, you get a thought, palette, or like take a step back and look at it from an outside perspective. Let's stop it. And the thing is, in theory, that sounds very simple, but when you're in the moment and having this thought, it's very and for me, when I got out of that was one of the big challenges I had. Was like whenever I had a thought, it was hard to challenge it. But it was so strong. So personally, I think it's very important to also first try to how strong kind of address, like, okay, I have this hunger for something. Is there like something else now? Take a step back, and then start to challenge it. Sometimes it's very difficult to challenge a thought when thought itself is so overwhelming. But yeah, that was the main thing that we so.
Yeah, and I think some of the other things are they tell you, you get those affirmations, and you put them everywhere. Yes, oh my God, and I was like, because I lived with a family, an extended family, so there were a lot of young, influential, impressionable young children as well surrounding me. So I just didn't know how to put those affirmations, on the fridge or everywhere, or like if I even in my room, like I honestly, for me, the culture I come from, I thought I will be embarrassing myself, putting on the fridge, that this is my friend, this is going to heal me, I'm brave. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But you know what Samar said about religion, Samar, it really like someone, I had a really, really, really bad experience once, really bad, and someone who has joined us, I saw her name, so you know who you are. I mean, she really kindly referred me to someone, she said, you need to speak to someone, and I did. And that lady, she gave me something really profound, which stayed with me, and I still use it. She told me, when this happens, when I get really down, and as you said, Mariam, I mean, how can you take a step back and look at it when you are panicking? You're going through this profound panic, and the only thing which can calm you down is engaging in that behavior. Yes, not eating. I mean, it will, because you're physically doing something which is you can physically feel, like if you're not eating, and you're avoiding the food, so there is a proof you have done something, and automatically it will make you feel a bit better. So this is your automatic response, and now to take a step back and look at it from the outsider and then make the decision, it's very difficult, because your impulse is, because anything can happen, anyone can upset you, this is how the life is, things happen, and then automatically your response is, I am going to go and engage in the behavior. So to answer your question, Samar, this lady told me, she said, you need to go and make the wudu. Yes. And she gave me the recitation to do. And she said, you really need to engage. And, when you do go, the water is very therapeutic, So you go, you make your wudu. I mean, automatically you go and you make your wudu, and you do that, It really, I mean, for me, that really, really, really calmed me down. And the more you do it, the more this becomes your habit. And then the less, you feel the need to engage in those behaviors, because automatically this, the whole dhikr, the whole religious thing, it stays in your mind. It becomes part of your lifestyle, but it doesn't happen overnight. Mariam, I have to say that, immediately the first time I did it, it worked, because I was so desperate, I needed something, so it worked. But slowly, when you build this up, so what happens? What is in your mind, which is not right, gets replaced by something which is really good. So even when you are struck, by those, like for example, if the bereavement, anything can happen in your family, and you feel, okay, maybe what will make me feel better is I go and engage in my relief behaviors, something which is going to provide the immediate relief, then automatically you will not do it, I mean, there is something very, very powerful within you which will make you stop, which will tell you, stop. And yeah, so this is, what I thought. But again, some are excellent research. There are so many areas, we need to look into. I mean, there is homeopathy, which really works as well, And there is also, other healing methods. The world is our oyster, and, and I think this is what we need to do. Everyone is going to come up with something unique, and it's all going to make the difference, Mariam. I really believe in that, inshallah. And I think, so many lives are going to be saved. And I also believe that, inshallah, one day there will not be a need, for our parents to pay like $1,500 to $1,600 a day So just because we can be in a room where they can tell us we are okay and we are good.
You know, you mentioned a really, and that was the body, which I think is so, the act of wudu itself automatically, it puts that frame of mind of purification. And I think it's important because they are directly related to practices. Yes, salah, definitely that might work. I would think that it's really beneficial from the research that I have found so far.
Summer, do you think your mic is on something? You're like, no, keeps coming.
I'm literally holding my phone in my hand.
Yeah, there is a breakup, and I think, but I think someone once said to me, you know, once you listen to this in the recording, it's better, because I had the same problem when I was speaking to Daria. But anyway, I really again, Summer, I have to, you know, really say your work, what you're doing is absolutely amazing. And at the same time, Mariam, I have to say one thing. I think what you're doing is really, really excellent. And I also have to say, I was in a position where I'm being very honest, you know, one of the most difficult experiences I have is when someone was in urgent need of medical intervention, and, you know, they are in a country in Africa. I honestly, that really gave me the nightmares. I mean, also to come up with, I mean, few months back, someone really needed an intervention, and I remember the money I needed was 12,000 in sterling. Right?
Wow.
Like, and 12 to 15,000 was immediate. I needed the money, and I was so shocked. I just didn't know where to get that £15,000 from, when there was no guarantee if this person was going to recover. And before that, you know, there was another case, you know, from Africa, when this person made a decision, Mariam, to stop everything and to go into the treatment, and she was able to get a medical grant. And guess what? She comes out, and not even 6 months, and she relapses. And she said to me, she said, you know, she said, look, she said, I gave up everything. She said, how can this be? And Summer, as you said, you know, yes, she got all these thoughts in her mind. She, you know, all those urges came back. And, you know, food is something. I mean, with the alcohol and Anonymous, all you have to do is give up the drinking, yeah? Stop one thing. How can you stop the food? So it is an area, but whereas, you know, with this person, I really felt what was needed was a lot of prayers, a lot of du'as, yes, for her to go to the local doctor, have a faith in the local doctor, have this collaboration for everyone to come in, and she's doing okay. And it's a miracle for me. I mean, it's something which needed 15 to 16,000 pounds, which I honestly personally didn't have. And if I had that sum of money, then of course, you know, human life is more important. And that made me realize, Summer, also the power of the faith, the power of coming together, and the difference, you know, the family and the love and the understanding and the community can make. To give someone hope and, you know, to make them strong is what is really, really needed. And this is where, Mariam, inshallah, if you come to Pakistan, and, you know, I mean, I invite you to, you know, honestly, to look into these spiritual healing centers as well. And especially the nutritional side. I mean, I really, 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 I would love to campaign for the Sunnah healing foods. You know, from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you know, what he ate. You know, the reason is, Mariam and Samar, because, you know, these foods, I am being very honest, if they can be combined into your meal plan, they really help aid the healing. And also, you know, some people, I mean, Samar, you know, automatically what you said about I'm going to go back to you, what you said about the Ramadan research, yeah?
Yes.
And you said, you know, that in Ramadan people felt about the fatur, that, you know, if we engage in fatur in the family, how are we going to look afterwards, right? This is what you said. So let me tell you something about the Ramadan. I mean, there was someone, when I started my website in the beginning, and someone said something really good to me. She said, you know, it was her niece who used Ramadan to get well and to heal.
Mm-hmm.
So the Ramadan is also the month for healing. So I think these people, who simply think, Ramadan becomes a trigger and Ramadan becomes, XYZ. I think we really
Yes.
need to look at the Ramadan, because if you know the reality of the Ramadan, you would wish and pray for Ramadan to be every day of the year. This is how important Ramadan is. This is there are so many hidden healing components to Ramadan. So I would really like to say that the Ramadan is also a month which is which can be really used as a month of healing, and especially if you are incorporating right kind of nutrition. And recently I came across something where somebody said they were panicking. They really felt that the food was going to make them gain weight.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when they came up with this scholar gave them a surah, and I couldn't believe it. It's one of the shortest surahs in the Quran, but there is one verse in the surah. There is one verse, and he said, if you listen to that surah and if you use that surah before you eat your food, all you have to do is, it's the Surah Al-Asr. And I was so amazed by it, because I never thought. So there is one line in the surah which is going to, help you. So, all this which is going through your mind, will inshallah go away, and you will simply view food as something which is there to fuel you, to take you from point A to B. So again, I think the religious side, the food and everything is very, very important. And I'm being very, very honest. So many people have used the sunnah foods for the healing. And it really helps, because it becomes a medicine to heal your body. And for me, I'm one of the examples. There is no way. Somebody asked me if I travel, what is the few things I take with me? And they are the sunnah foods. Mariam, I cannot imagine myself traveling somewhere, without, the dates, those walnuts, those, those things. Honestly, I think I would definitely have a breakdown if I have to go a day without those things.
You make such a good point, Nadia, and I would love to get involved in the project as well. I think that's such an important area that needs to be incorporated when we think about how religion and spirituality interplays with eating disorders.
Mm. And honestly, everything else, the way the media is and everything, with the whole body image and everything, I think Samar, your research, inshallah, will open up many doors. And Mariam, what you're doing, giving a hope, because Mariam, one of the saddest thing is, America is so horrifically expensive when it comes to the treatment. It really, really is. Even though there are not for profit organizations out there, but we have to remember one thing, even when you are going through the helpline, and you're speaking to someone, yes, I used to do the helpline as well. I've worked on the helpline, as a volunteer, to gain some skills. And, we can't communicate both ways. What we can say to them, it's simply about those people, for them to relieve themselves, for them to speak, to lighten the load. You're not allowed to give them anything back. And, they need, people need something immediately. They need something, especially the Muslims, because we have such a close family, so they need something, they want to hear something which is profound, which is going to make the difference. They want to hear that, their feelings are valid, what they're speaking about is really, really, and then they need something. They really need to know that there is someone out there who's praying for them. So I think, it's such an open research area. We need every kind of a research. And, Mariam, if you can honestly come up with something, please, pitch the idea to me, because when I do go back to Pakistan, this is one thing I'm really asking the universities to do, to look into this area, come up with as many research papers as you can. And so, we have substantial kind of literature. And if you go to my website, honestly, you will see every kind of research I find. I put it out there for the reason, because I want to show that there is a different research, coming from the Muslim world, and every research is valid. Every research is there for a reason, if you understand what I'm saying. So anything, we can get, we need, yes.
Nadia makes such an important point about the diversity that's needed and the intersectionality that's needed in research, because predominantly the research findings, they come from non-Muslim scholars, and we need more Muslim scholars to engage in all different areas of research in respect to eating disorders. So I totally agree with you on that one.
Yes, and I think, yes, sorry, Mariam, please go.
No. You can finish. Going to say that I need to this part, but I didn't go since I was kind of wondering if start closing.
I think we need, yes. I really want to thank everyone who joined, and I was so happy to see, I have to say some hello to someone from Kuwait. I mean, honestly, it was so good to not see her, but have her join us, and all the others. I mean, I recognized a lot of names, and then there were other things which I didn't recognize and they didn't make sense to me. They had nothing to do with our conversation. So which was a distraction, and which I think people need to avoid. And please, stop sending those requests that you want to be in the live video, because, this is not an open discussion forum. This is very focused, and our reason, the reason we do these IG lives, and the reason people come, because we want this, this videos, and because it's simply to make a difference, So it's very important, what we discuss. So I'm sorry, but please, I make this request many times. Stop sending these requests, because no, the live session is only for the person who's here and who's involved, and it's about them, and it's about getting the right message across, please. So anything else, Samar, you want to say, please go ahead.
Yes, no, thank you so much, Nadia. It was just I'm so happy that I was able to join finally, after many technical problems. I would really encourage all the British Muslim women that are on this call to please reach out if they would like to take part in the research. We need more Muslim voices. We need to hear the experiences of Muslim women. And also, I reach out to Muslim therapists that are on this call to sort of contact me via Instagram, who would be interested in taking part in my doctorate, and that would be amazing. Thank you so much.
Mariam, anything you want to say?
Oh, I learned a lot from and it was really great to meet and Nadia. So yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe next time, we need to look at, because I just got a comment, and thank you so much for bringing this up about the connection. This is a problem, and I think maybe next time, Maria, maybe Zoom or something, we can do a recorded session like that. And also, I think maybe because yeah, I think it's with the IG Live, because people are trying to join. Maybe the traffic is having a bit of the is affecting the connection. I'm not sure what it is, but I think it's happening so many times. And this IG Live, it's just the connection is not really good. And we it's such a useful conversation. So yeah. So guys, thank you so much. This was so excellent. Thank you for telling us. Mariam, that was brilliant, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mariam. It was so wonderful to meet you. Nadia, it's so nice to see you again. Thank you so much for organizing. Next time, let's do it on Zoom, please.
Yes. I also encourage that, inshallah. Mariam, inshallah, when you go to Pakistan, please let me know so we can meet there, and inshallah, yes. Okay, guys, thank you so much, and we are signing off, and thank you, everyone. Thank you.